Gavin, how are you?
I'm great. Nice to see you, and I'm finally glad we got this started.
No, brilliant. I know. And we had a little, but that's the world of elite sport that we're going to go on to talk about. So it's
Absolutely.
fantastic. And thank you for joining us from Las Vegas, which from my little office in the northwest of England is brilliant. So wish we could have been there with you, but it's a close second
Well,
best, isn't it?
we've probably got weather like you right now. It snowed the last 2 days in Las Vegas, so it's
Okay.
about as cold as we get. We were wondering when winter would come, but it's finally here, and it's kind of nice to have a different set of
Yeah.
weather conditions.
Okay. Yeah, we've had a bit here on the mountains, which is good and nice. So, well, thanks for joining us. It was interesting our introduction because I had JP on, and after the thing, I said, look, I'm really looking to speak to some people, and he just went, right, I've got this man you need to chat to. So here we are. So it shows how
Wonderful,
small the
JP.
world is. So it's brilliant. So our guest today, Gavin Pratt, it doesn't just train elite athletes, it builds environments where humans perform under the brightest lights and the heaviest pressure. Gavin Pratt is a senior director of strength and conditioning at the UFC Performance Institute in Las Vegas, the global hub of world class fighters and combat athletes. For over 2 decades, he's worked at the highest level of sport, designing systems that help athletes thrive physically, mentally, and behaviorally when everything else is on the line. But Gavin's story isn't just about the octagon, it's about resilience. It's about turning setbacks, including his own early injury challenges, into a lifelong obsession with human optimization. He blends science with real world application, high performance, and long term health and intensity with intelligence. In environments where careers are made or broke within minutes, Gavin has learned that what truly sustains performance, clarity, discipline, emotional control, and the courage to protect the human behind the athlete. Today, we're exploring what leaders and ambitious professionals can learn from elite sport about operating at your best, unlocking potential in others, and building systems that don't just chase performance but sustain it. This is a conversation about pressure, preparation, and what it really takes to unlock human potential. That
Yeah, I
sound
hope.
okay? No, well, I mean, listen, I'm a combat fan. I've been involved in combat sport pretty much all of my adult life, so I kind of understanding that, and watching it and being a fan, the pressure you guys must be under to get athletes at that level and, seeing the intensity that athletes have to go through to get to that point. I'm sure there's going to be lots of insights from this conversation that people can really take away. So
Yeah. It's an incredibly chaotic and challenging sport to be able to put your stamp on in terms of performance, but there's certainly systems that we try and back up to make sure that that happens as best as possible.
awesome. So, like we do with all of our guests, it's just because curiosity kind of sits along a lot of the things that we talk around. So, what's something you're curious about right now?
Becoming the best version of a dad that I can be.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think under a high performance, chaotic environment that I currently work in, and then my wife and I are obviously in Las Vegas, and we have no family here. They're all back in Australia. I think for me, it's trying to find that balance of how I can be the best father and husband possible because I know how to work,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
my 3-year-old is new, and I want to keep working on that skill now.
Lovely.
Hmm.
And hopefully that weans through because that's the element, isn't it? If we are, you know, senior director of strength and conditioning, or we are, you know, actually when we come home, that's the different part of us as humans, isn't it? And I'm sure athletes that are coming in, are bringing in, if they've got young children and they're looking at optimal performance and they're not sleeping, they're bringing the bugs home. It's all part of the human optimization program, isn't it?
Yeah, and even just that old saying they sort of do what you do rather than what you say, and leading by example. And that's made me look inwards and say, what am I doing in my life to highlight to him this is how you should lead it, and the things you should be doing, and what can I tick boxes on and saying I'm happy that he's seeing me do that, and other things where it could be as simple as having a phone in my hand at home, like what shouldn't I be doing to highlight to him. So they're great reflection pieces, I think.
I was going to say that. See, that's the word that was going through my mind. They do make you more self-aware and reflect a lot, don't they, kids? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a process in itself, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. My only thing I will share, and we'll move on, but I'm sure there's listeners here. My daughter's 13, and I think we're all work in progresses. So, um, but I'm sure
Absolutely.
you'll find the balance perfectly well
We got to keep working on it. That's for sure.
with everything. I think,
Yeah.
it's one of my, as a coach working with lots of different people. One of the things I'm always saying is we are just work in progresses all the time, aren't we? And I think it's, and that's a great thing with watching kids is actually they just take setback on the way and just keep cracking on, don't they?
Yeah, yeah. And I think once we're adults, that whole Dunning-Kruger effect is something that we need to remind ourselves of as well. It's like you might get to a point where you consider yourself quite knowledgeable in a space, but I have this saying that I try and live by, which is everyone is king. And it's like you're in a room with someone, with a bunch of people, and each one of those people is going to have more knowledge about a particular subject than you on something.
Yeah.
So, calm your heels. You might be an expert in one thing, but there's plenty of things to learn if you're open to it.
And I love that because it's that if you're open to it part, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It truly is.
And if you're allowed to keep your ego in check,
Absolutely.
which
It's a
again,
big part of it.
martial arts is one thing that makes you
Well,
control it very
yeah.
much.
And look, to be honest, they're some of the greatest athletes I've worked with from that standpoint. I think they're some of the most humble, wonderful humans that I've ever met. And yet they do the most violent, intense, chaotic sport you can imagine. And I truly think it's because every day you turn up to training in martial arts, there's going to be some piece of humility that you need to accept and move on to become better.
Yeah.
And as a result, they've become really, really wonderful humans.
No, completely agree. That's my experience from working with them a lot as well.
Yeah.
So the idea of this podcast is that there's kind of three sections. The section one, looking around, how to optimize yourself, and we can take that in both ways. It would be great to explore that from yourself because, I think there's been a lot of people who inspire to be in the position you're in, or certainly in leadership positions with pressure. So how you manage that, giving an athlete a program,
Mm.
knowing that they've got a certain time and they've got to be able to peak at the right time. I'm sure there's a level of pressure behind that. But then also how you could share any insights around how people can optimize themselves and anything, that would be great. And then again, bringing that into kind of how do we get the best out of other people and how we can lock potential in others would be really good. And then we'll always wrap it up. I think if people are going to give us an hour of their time listening to us, it's always good to help them kind of just wrap it up and show, right, okay, so what? What can we do with the information, this good conversation, and take forward to do stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Happy?
Sounds wonderful.
So if I just turned around and said, optimizing yourself, where does that land?
For me, there's got to be a philosophy. It always starts with a philosophy, and this is something in the mentorship that I run online that I try and get through to people is the coaching philosophy or the human philosophy is a big part of it because it's what you always come back to. So, for example, for me, I'm a passionate and energetic leader who strives to optimize performance with an athlete-centered, evidence-based approach. And when I look at that statement, I need to understand two things can be true at once. And so there, in somewhere in that statement, there's a gap. I have to identify what my gap analysis is. And in that statement, the gap for me is passionate. So I'm a passionate and energetic leader. Well, passionate's great. That's a really positive thing. Two things can be true at once. But passionate for me personally is also a negative that I need to work on or a gap. The reason is I'll always follow my passions. And that's led me to being in a hotel room for 8 months in China, not getting paid for a job because I saw the future being really, really fun and cool. And I followed that and I didn't get any money for it. But I thought at the end of this, something good will come from it. Which did. I got employed by the UFC because I wasn't getting paid somewhere else. So that worked out well. But passionate also for me means I'm very caring and I'll give 100% to everyone. If I don't get that back, then maybe that's what short circuits me a little bit. That could be colleagues, that could be athletes, whatever it is. I expect that same care and emphasis and passion. And so sometimes I might need to walk into a meeting room at work, or when I'm speaking with family at home, maybe there's different levels of passion that I've got to sort of go into those conversations, understanding like, prepare yourself. This person
Okay.
doesn't think the same way as you. And if they have a go at you, just bring that passion down a little bit and calm. So yeah, I think that's probably what it means for me, is maximizing myself, but having a philosophy that I stand by.
I love that. And that's something you encourage as part of your mentorship for people to find their philosophy.
Yeah, module one. That's what we
Wow.
go through, because I think what happens is that underpins every decision that you make. And it also, we often do a needs analysis for athletes, right?
Yeah.
We often look at their testing batteries and things like that. How we are analyzing and assessing ourselves. And I think if you have a coaching philosophy about how you approach your work and how you approach your own self-development, then that's your own needs analysis as well. And that takes time, right? Like to understand what your philosophy should be does take a little bit of manipulation so that it sounds like a really positive, strong statement. But within there somewhere, what that gap is. And that's what your work on for the next 6 to 12 months has to be.
I love that. I
Mm.
love the I just love the theory and the concept of actually the the needs analysis for self. I think
Yeah.
it's such a as you're saying, I think it's such a simple concept, but actually I'm curious how many people actually stop and see it that way because it's so important, isn't it?
It is, and even just not just for self, but I do this with the staff here. We kind of align it to our overall department maxim. So if we have a maxim, we look then as a unit, and then we look at our own coaching philosophy potentially on how our philosophy can work into that maxim, so that we play a role in helping deliver it. And an example was, I had a young coach who's a fantastic energy source. He's brilliant on the gym floor. And I just noticed for a week or two, he was really flat. It wasn't himself. And then when we sat down for a meeting, we went through what his coaching philosophy was, and just like, remind yourself, what is your coaching philosophy? One of the things he said was he prides himself on individualized programming for the athletes. And that's a big part of our role here at the UFC. And in saying that, he discovered that because we were so busy at that point in time, we were definitely at capacity in terms of our athlete load. He was pretty much copy and pasting for like one or two athletes just to save a bit of time. And so when he was on the gym floor, he wasn't bought into the program because it deviated from his
Okay.
coaching philosophy. And
Right.
as soon as we identified that, the next day he changed
Changed
the
the program.
program and he was in there and back to normal.
So it's almost like his own values and beliefs had been challenged
Correct.
by, yeah.
By himself.
Yeah, that's
He
what I'm
wasn't
saying, by
living up to it.
himself.
Yeah.
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 And
Yeah.
but again, I mean, there's two parts of that. I see that one, that's a great leadership thing that you recognize that in him, but that you could see actually, I know his normal, and that's not his normal. So there's a change. So therefore, we need to address that, which I think is something, which is a great leadership skill. But
Well, thank you. And I think also like there's another thing that might have led into this as well. Like we as a department do something called an action plan. And this could be used personally or as a team. We tend to use it as a team, and it's definitely goal setting specifically, but it underpins that maxim that we speak about before, and then it's maybe a time frame. So we've got a week, 2 weeks, a month target to set particular goals. So we've set them up into three categories. The first one will be a personal project. So something that you're wanting to produce and provide as part of this department towards that maxim. But it's up to you. You can do it. It's your passion project. There's another thing where we probably need you to do. So it's like a team project where this is your task and we need you to try and achieve this, but you tell us what you're going to achieve within this time frame. And then the third one is personal. And it might have nothing to do with work whatsoever. It could be, I want to do jiu-jitsu 3 times a week. And the way that I was hoping to use that was, if you're putting a yes or no at the end of that time frame of that month, and you didn't manage to get your 3 jiu-jitsu sessions in, I'm going to ask questions. Why not? Was it that you were lazy, or was it because you're actually too snowed under with work? In a sense, we've now got to change that. If you're at capacity, we've got to make sure we do something about it so that you're not at capacity and you have time to go and do that. With the principle of, if you're coming in as a happy person, we're going to get more out of you.
That's a nice culture thing, isn't it? Because I think what you like you've said there. I mean, I really like the way you're looking at, because I guess it's the motivational drivers, isn't it? I'm doing something for myself, I'm doing something for the team, but also there's something that's driving me personally, professionally. I think I really quite like that.
Mm.
And the fact that how often would you check in with that? Is that a monthly thing to say if they?
Yes, we've tried different durations. So we've tried weekly. We've tried, I don't know if you're a fortnightly person or bi-weekly.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we've also used monthly as well. I think depending on the logistics of your facility, a week had worked, but it doesn't work here in Vegas. We're too
Okay.
busy to do that. So we're now shifted that to a month, and it
Right.
works really well.
No, I like that.
Mm.
And is
Uh,
that something that you guys have come up with, or is that something that you've
Yeah,
developed
pretty
in-house?
much. I did a little bit of research and then sort of adapted it to suit our needs. So the action plan idea was something I discovered, but then the way that we've sort of implemented it, like I've spoken to you, that was something that we just created in-house and
Mm,
decided that that was a good way to do it because we're always very busy and we want to
yeah.
check in on each other and make sure that we've got happy campers coming into work.
But again, I guess that looking at busy environments, and what you were saying there is about, you want to get the best out of them. And what we know about human optimization is if you're doing things that motivate you, you're getting into things, you're finding balance. I mean, elite sport and balance is always challenging, isn't it? And
Yeah.
and then throw a 3-year-old into the mix again. That's balance is always, and then work-life balance is this thing of going, okay, it exist, but actually there is. If the three jujitsus a week is your non-negotiables and you can get those in and you're doing something towards your own passion project, then actually you're still moving forward and progressing forward as well, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And,
Marvelous.
I think that's an important part that you're still looking after yourself. That's going to
Mm.
make you a better husband, father, colleague, because you're not falling behind in your own needs analysis. You're still driving forward in that sense. And, to be honest, that work-life balance is the challenge, mate. We all know that if we work in high performance sport, I don't know that you can get work-life balance if you work in elite sport. I don't know that that exists, if I'm honest, but you can do your best to
Yeah.
get a little bit more life in there than just
Yeah.
work.
The
Yeah.
best version of
Yeah.
of work-life balance within the elite sports sector.
Yeah.
I
I
think
agree.
what I really like about that is the fact of, but you're also living it. So if you're asking an athlete to get the best out of them and supporting them, you're actually yourselves are a bit like what you were saying about the reflection of, you know, now your son has come into the world, you reflecting yourself and going, right, okay, what do I need to do to be the best version of my dad? You're also
Mhm.
looking at the team and saying, well, I need to keep them, because that culture that's going to, everyone's looking out for each other, aren't they? Everyone's going to hold each other accountable. And that might just be the 3 times on the jiu-jitsu mat because they know actually they're going to perform optimal, which means they're going to give the athlete better, which means the athlete's going to perform better. And
Bingo.
ultimately, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Bingo. And, on top of that, we often hear the word hold each other accountable almost like a negative thing. I feel like this is holding each other accountable for the tasks that you set from a work perspective, but also like I care for you. I want to hold you accountable to your own health mentally and physically
Mm.
because this world is crazy and so is the
Yeah.
work-life balance. And I'm concerned about you and I'm worried about you that you're still pushing on in the way that we want you to be a happy human. And that's ultimately what matters the most. And I think if, let's say, jiu-jitsu is the example, then in our world, that means a lot to the athletes. It's like, oh, you practice what you preach. You're getting
Yeah.
your craft in, so you understand how to help me better in my sport. That's a big selling point too. So it kind of comes back to
Yeah.
work,
Wins. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
indirectly.
Yeah. As long as you're not rolling with the athletes and then
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, they're a bit better than me, mate. But I think there's some that could probably handle them.
yeah. No, definitely. But again, I think it's what I really like that, and I think there's so many insights that can be taken. Is actually it come back to, you know we are probably optimal in the job that we do when we're putting ourselves first. I've got a really, I always turn around to a lot of my inner circle, should we call it, and I'll turn around. If I've said I'm going to do something and not doing it, I think they're being a friend by calling me out.
Yeah.
The thing is, if you let me get away with not,
Bingo.
then
Yeah.
actually, how much do they care? So I'm saying I actually think they care more if they go, come on, you've missed one. I expect four next week.
Yeah. There's a greater expectation because you know what they're capable of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And how do you get people to buy into that?
Staff,
Yeah.
um, I think just by explaining the benefit of it. I know that sounds very simple, but this is something I think you could do and then never talk about ever again, and then it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
But for me, it's about this is something to do and then utilizing that constantly and consistently with them to highlight how beneficial it's been. So there's no point just creating a coaching philosophy and then have it collect dust in the corner.
Yeah.
It's about as a leader bringing your staff or your friends back to that philosophy to remind them of those qualities and of that potential gap that they've discovered. And so, even as a very basic example, some of the coaches that I work with here, I used passionate, but they use more technical gaps.
Okay.
So they might be younger in their career, and theirs is simply they want to improve their data insights. Okay, well then I'm going to be out. That's going to help me guide their projects in that action plan to say we should probably be pushing more towards challenging you with your projects to get insights on VALD and look at the data insights to a counter movement jump because that's your current gap.
Okay.
So we can. That's why it's important to shape the philosophy first, because then that gives me more information around how I can actually help push you further in your career and your current role. So then hopefully, hey, look at that experience you've now garnered. I'm going to now try and push you towards managerial work.
Okay.
And I want you to get that promotion. So now we might have to work on how do you deal with teams? How do you work with people better? And now your coaching philosophy shifts 12 months later down the track.
No, I love that. So it's a completely evolutionary and it keeps evolving all the time.
And keeps them interested and engaged. Like they know they're constantly getting better because you're highlighting that to them based on their coaching philosophy and the task and projects that you're helping them do each week, fortnight, month, whatever it is you choose for this action plan.
I love that. And how do you feel that your mindset's then changed over your career? Have you, because obviously there's an impression you're quite grounded. That's my initial impression. I don't know if you'll challenge that.
Yeah. I had a lot of early years in S&C where I worked in public gyms or for myself. And so what I guess for me is that's the most important information to give, right? Like, yeah, we're very fortunate here at the UFC to have the bells and whistles in terms of technology, but ultimately all that matters is the human connection. And are you engaging with your staff and are you engaging with the athletes? You're probably going to get more out of their performance just by giving them that belief that you've got their back than using all the technology that we have access to now. And that's what I found when I was working either on my own or just in the garage gyms, right? It's creating that buy-in from them. So I feel like, I don't know, for me, that honesty is everything. It's like this, if you'll know if I'm annoyed or not, I'll tell you.
Okay.
But you'll also I'll be happy as well because that's who I am built like naturally. So I just think being honest with people is the best policy. And that seems to be, from an athlete and colleague standpoint, bought into pretty well as well.
But I think you know where you stand, don't you? When you're honest with people and everyone knows where you stand. And I think, that human connection is then an awful lot easier.
Yeah. Not everyone likes that though. That can be a problem too. But if I'm honest with myself about who I am, then that's mainly the thing that matters. Like if I'm being genuine, then I'd rather do that than pretend to be someone to your face and then be someone different behind it.
Oh yeah, I understand. I agree with that. I guess then, on the last thing around staff, is that something you recruit for? So say you are recruiting people in do you actually recruit with certain, more the human connection part just as much as important as going, have you got your master's or your PhD in S&C?
I think in our industry, in our role as S&C coaches, it's probably more important
Yeah. Okay.
because and the one of the guys we've just recently employed, he's been with us just over a year now. It's his first proper job, but he was one of our interns.
Okay.
And as the dynamics here at the UFC is fighters will come in and then they'll be working with a particular coach. So I have the athletes that I work with. And then if he's an intern, he might help me with those athletes.
Right.
But I've got the athletes that I work with as an example. As an intern, he's helping me with some of them and some of the other coaches. And it's quite hard because we have this intern program that goes for 3 months, then they leave and we get another set of interns. And so the fighters are sort of can sometimes be a bit like, oh, don't put me with an intern. Like they're just going to change. I trust you. I know you. You're always here. So it's quite hard for the interns. This guy, after 2 days, managed to get on with absolutely everyone.
Okay.
And there was just something there. I'm like, that's a really special quality. But he's never worked in a full-time job in elite sport before.
Right.
But that didn't matter to me. I'm like, we can teach the X's and O's.
Yeah.
But you can't teach that. Or it's very, very difficult to teach what he has. And he's got it in spades as well. And 1 year later, it's like he's worked in this industry for 5 to 10 years. He's brilliant.
Wow. That's really good, isn't it?
Yeah. People are everything, right? The way people are and the connections, it changes all the dynamics.
Oh, I think it was nice to hear that because for me, it's probably the most important thing I've ever recruited anybody on. I think, I think that the ability to have human connection, the ability to build rapport, to create trust in conversations, build connection, even understand energy, when you're in the room with somebody, I think is just so important. If you can read that in people, it's always been something I've certainly leaned into. So I totally get that. I guess the point from an athlete, is there a way of them building trust with athletes? Because, I guess I understand it, and I'm very conscious that this is your bag. But obviously, you're going to have, do people come to you for fight? Are they there for fight camp? So they're for what, 12, 16 weeks?
It varies, but I can go into that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the short periods of time, and you've obviously got to build up rapport, trust, and then get them to peak performance. And I'm sure there's a lot of pressure in that whole relationship.
Yeah. So in Vegas, because we're the hub, we have fighters, who live in Vegas. So we train them all year round.
Okay.
Then on the furthest other end of the spectrum is we'll have athletes come to us and say they're fighting in 2 weeks and we've never met them and they don't speak English. So we've got the full spectrum on what we're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest lessons I learned was when I first moved and worked in China with the elite sports there. And before I had any kind of grasp of Mandarin language, is what I noticed was one, often as coaches, we talk too much in our instructions because when you haven't got the language, you can't just start waffling on. You've got to get to the point and you've got to do it well with your hands and your signals. But two, you can really build great rapport with athletes just through energy and just through your body language and your facial expressions and how you approach them. There were so many athletes that I couldn't talk to, but we were mates just because they knew I cared about them.
Yeah.
And they could tell through my body language and the effort that I was going to make sure that strength and conditioning session was right for them, even in a group setting. I cared about whether they were the best athlete in the room or just struggling to make the team. It didn't matter to me. They have to make sure that S&C session is good for them. And they feel that. And I think they respond then because they can see that you care. It's that old adage, right? But here, obviously, it's elite level, last minute potential. I got to get you ready for the fight. So for us, it's the belief that we've done this before because we have. Yeah. So understanding their sport, understanding what maybe they need in those last 1 to 2 weeks to feel that psychophysiological preparation, that for us is where we do our best work, I believe.
Is there anything you can share insights from that are obviously non-secrets? Don't be sharing anything.
No, it could simply be from there's there's a few papers based around decay rates in terms of adaptations of physiology that you might lose or dissipate if you don't train them. It also kind of ties in with how people want to feel going into a fight. A lot of the time they want to feel like they've had that last blowout and they're feeling really explosive and ready for the fight. So just channeling those three components, often power, speed-based neural type circuits, are what our MMA fighters love to do. And if we sprinkle in things like throwing a med ball, like a cross, throwing a cross with a med ball as hard as you can against our med ball wall, using synaptic screens to look at hand-eye coordination, or tuning in things like ecological dynamics where you're trying to solve problems in that reactive space, and then using strobe glasses, which takes out your 20/20 vision while they're shadow boxing, and giving them a simple cue of visualize it, see it happening. You're in there, 10 seconds left in what they're doing. And instead of saying 10 seconds, you simply use the clacker of your hands.
Okay.
Start to get those types of components into the head, the psychophysiological preparation pieces.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
But what I heard from that also is the fact that people come to it, but because they know that there's trust there because you've been to do it before, are they already kind of buying into that trust? So when they're kind of walking in and they know that you've been there for a long time, you know it's the kind of job that you do, they're already going, if you say, right, we're going to put strobe glasses on. And for anyone listening who's not put strobe glasses on, it's a really interesting kind of challenge. Yeah. And there's a story which we haven't got time for, but they made me do it on stage. And for the first time I'd ever put them on. Yeah, I got proper thrown under the bus, but yeah, it was funny. But yeah, so no, it's thinking about that, you know, to do all those kind of things. Is that something just naturally that people then do?
I think that probably comes under the banner of the UFC PI in general, right? Yeah. Like in terms of MMA and combat sports, there's not many, if any, facilities that, particularly for MMA, that are like this. And day in, day out, we're dealing with elite level UFC fighters. And so it is something that we've dealt with. And maybe we're fortunate in the fact that when many athletes come in here, there's that trust and belief just because of the branding of it.
Yeah.
But for us, it's got to go deeper than that. And we've got to highlight to them that we do know what we're doing when it comes to the preparation of an MMA athlete. Because even if you look at field-based sport preparation to combat sport preparation, they should be done pretty differently, actually.
Right.
And when they see what some of the things we do with them and how they relate to their sport, that's the buy-in. They're like, this makes sense to me. I actually understand what you're trying to do. That's cool. Even if they don't speak the language, you can see there's a buy-in moment. So I think it's important to, yes, build the confidence through the PI, but then you still got to produce the product. And that for us is a big part of it.
And there's two things that come to, you know, you talked around energy at the start of this and kind of, you know, making sure, and, you know, and then I love the reference. So I was in China. I can't really speak Mandarin, but and I've been to China, so I related to that and going, but actually how you can have a conversation through hand language and body language and hand signals. But also when you were saying that, your smile just boomed, and I could almost feel the passion coming through. But again, that takes an awful lot of energy to stay up there, doesn't it? So again, it comes back to important why you need to keep looking after yourself, because that trust could be, I'm assuming, broken if you're coming in with that one day, but the second day you're less optimal or you're less passionate, and you haven't got that communication. So it's almost coming back to that full circle, isn't it? Why it's important to.
It is. It's also coming back to that selection of people for the role. People often, like the intern that I mentioned before that we employed, people buy into energy. And if you're that way inclined, regardless of whether you feel like it or not, you feed off the energy that you get back. Yeah. So you tend to just go, I'm feeling flat, but I know if I kick up a notch, I'm going to get back that from the athlete, and then I'll feel better in an hour.
Yeah.
Whereas some people just stay flat, and that then affects the S&C session. And I think one thing that we forget about often in this industry is that not all athletes love S&C.
Okay.
Right. So how can we make it enjoyable for them? How can we get them to really actually come into this space and go, I'm looking forward to this. Actually, this is kind of nice. It's a different change from my technical sport. That to me is one of the biggest selling points you can do as a coach, is not convince them, but almost like bring them around and say, you
Yeah.
might have gone from not liking S&C to actually now being really bought into it. And it's a big part of how you prepare for your fights now.
And it's come a long way, hasn't it? I mean, gosh, I started my healthcare physio journey 20 odd years ago working with some UFC fighters. And one of the things, strength and conditioning was the bodybuilding gym next door. We'll just go in, we'll just do what they do.
Yep.
And if anyone got injured, there wasn't even any weights low enough to do any kind of rehab based stuff because they were just all the big rusty dumbbells.
Yeah.
It has really progressed, hasn't it? And and I know what you guys are doing there is really changing it, and hopefully that is then filtering down across all the sports.
Yeah. And, on that, that's a great point, because now there's so many considerations there around weight classes.
Yeah.
So if we did that sort of training, which is obviously targeting hypertrophy, we might be damaging their ability to make weight.
Oh, yeah.
So now we have to be cognizant of that, which is, as we term here, the antithesis of S&C. We're trying not to put on functional lean mass. We're actually, in some cases, trying to lose it.
Yeah.
And there's no research, funnily enough, around how to lose functional mass. Because why would you want to do that in any sport? Well, we have to do it, guys. So now what we're trying to do is actually reverse engineer hypertrophy and say, if you were to put on hypertrophy, what would you do? Okay, let's do the complete opposite of that. And hopefully we can start losing mass because this person's too big for their weight class.
Yeah.
It's a
Oh God, yeah, of course.
phenomenal
Yeah,
challenge. Yeah.
yeah, it is. And how do you deal with that pressure as coaches?
I think the way that I can't speak for anyone else, but for me personally, it's trust in our nutrition team. We work with some incredible practitioners here at the UFC in terms of nutrition. Have got some really great tactics around that. But it's also playing your role and understanding the science of what you're trying to do, and just trusting that process, because often a fight camp would be 8 weeks in duration. And we've had athletes come to us 7 weeks out being 43, 44 pounds over and
Wow.
10, 11% body fat.
Oh, yeah, the math doesn't work there, does
They're
it?
not fat. They're
Yeah.
not fat. Yeah, the math ain't mathin'. And so we've got to now do the complete opposite of what a performance type program would be. And so one of the systems we utilize there is called the MMA hierarchy. And the MMA hierarchy is when they get into that fight camp, sometimes beforehand, but most of the time in fight camp, we're going to look at what our main focus would be. Keep the main thing the main thing. Is it make weight? Is it mitigate injury? Is it optimize performance? And the reason we're using that is because if these athletes don't make weight, they don't get paid. They don't pay rent. If they get injured and can't fight, they don't get to fight. They don't get their wage, right? So we need to get them to the fight. Then we can start looking at, all right, weight's in a good place. No risk of injury at the moment. I'll make sure I continue that. Okay, now I can focus on optimizing performance. Let's get after that. Now, can you combine some of those components? Yes, you can. You got to get pretty creative, but if we got to get them to make weight, mitigate injury, and also to optimize performance, now you've got to think pretty deeply about your program.
So you've got quite a lot of trust in each other as well, haven't you, as a team?
You have to, yeah. And there's so many components, particularly with that example, where 80, 85% of that person making weight is going to be based around the nutrition. But if we make the wrong mistake, our 15% can have a really detrimental effect to that outcome. So we have to work in tandem to make sure that we're not messing up the weight cut.
Yeah.
And one of the ways we've done that, the head of nutrition here, Charles Stahl, who's a genius at what he does, created this heat acclimation protocol. And what we're doing there is basically they're riding in a hot tent so that we create a thermal impulse, and then they'll work through that. But instead of doing conditioning at the end of their strength and conditioning session, we might actually use that conditioning in the tent. So now we're not adding training units onto their training week. So you were mentioning about how you've got to work together. That's one of the ways that we have done that, is to look at maybe we can both get what we need out of it. If it's a glycolytic type training session intervention, We might have to put them in the tent, but then our time frame in the tent has to come down because the intensity. So those sorts of things work together a little bit nicer.
So when you, so say an athlete comes in, is that, so what I'm kind of getting an impression, and it'd be cool if you could expand on it, would just be like, so say an athlete comes in and that example, is that quite an extreme example? I'm
Yeah.
assuming. Yeah, okay. I thought
Yeah.
we have got better, haven't we? And I know the old school was probably sit in a sauna for 3 days and hope that you can still walk in, you know. So in that kind of extreme example, is that the athlete walks in, weighs in day one, and then it's like, okay, we actually need a team meeting
Mm.
around a strategy. And is that strategy then comes amongst all of the team members, and then you can all have to keep working together?
Yeah, I mean it's so varied. That would be the key, is to have like a key stakeholder meeting with the athlete, with the coaches, look at periodization, look at when we're doing things. That would be awesome. The problem here is that that can happen and does happen. Sometimes it'll be partial
Okay.
key stakeholders and the others can't make it because they're traveling to look at an event.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll just be nutrition, S&C, and the athlete,
Right.
and you just got to deal with
Yeah.
it. So you have to try and work it out for that athlete for sure, and working it into their current training timetable. And that for us probably in terms of prescription of energy system development would come to S&C. So if we think that they need some glycolytic based work, some sprint work, but we can't do that and then go to an hour of heat acclimation straight after because that's too much. We'll combine those two because we've created those protocols as a
Okay.
multiple department process.
Wow. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's so multifactorial.
So much so. I don't think many, like this isn't putting any other sports down for sure. I just think MMA has got so many considerations. Like if you think of just their technical
Mm.
component, our vice president of performance here, Duncan French, talks about it being the decathlon of combat sports. Like we
Yeah.
have to put in all the areas, and that means they've got to train that. And then
Yeah.
we've got to fit S&C on top of that. Oh, and
Yeah.
now we've got weight cut too. So we've got
Yeah.
to somehow put that in there. Massive amounts to think about.
And then and then there's all the mentality of the athlete's still got to go in, they've got to close the cage door, and then they've got to be able to perform optimally, like you say.
Yeah. I've had athletes who have been prepared as they've ever been, from a athlete standpoint. Dean Amasinga, who's a great friend of mine and a fantastic MMA coach, has the FMA model. We look at fighter, martial artist, and athlete. And the reason that works is not only because that might sort of help understand who that athlete is, but from S&C standpoint, that's always helped me personally to understand what my main role is, which is with the athlete and developing those qualities. But
Right.
we also have an option to underpin. So if you're looking at the martial artist and their skill set, their technical skill set, we can certainly help them underpin those qualities, but I'm not teaching them how to punch or to grapple, but I can help them underpin that with the same sort of strength and power adaptations or energy system adaptations. The fighter, which is more like your dog, the kind of like just no quit, iron will kind of athlete, we can help develop that psychophysiological ability. So their ability to step into the cage, like you said, with confidence, to know that I'm prepared as an athlete, as a martial artist. Now I just got to go and fight because I believe in my preparation. And for me, that psychophysiological piece is probably the most important thing of what we do.
Mm. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
I find it, I do find it fascinating. I can imagine the communication between you all has to be pretty much on point now, quite a lot of the time.
Yeah. There's a lot that, some things can get through. Like I'm sure you're aware from a PT standpoint, what you're probably told is different to what they tell the S&C coach. No, I'm fine, coach. I can crack on. And then they come to you and say, my elbow's really sore, mate. Can you look at it? So that's normal human behavior, right? I
Yeah.
think the greater we can communicate between departments, the greater that those outcomes become positive for the athlete.
And I guess ultimately that's the most important, isn't it? If we're all working together for the athlete and everyone can feel that, then the athlete will buy in, won't they? And then hopefully that communication, that honesty comes around full circle as well.
Yeah. I think we all need to remember if we're working in sport, we're in a people service industry. So without the athletes, none of us would have a job.
Mm.
So we've just got to remember why we're here. And often we'll have our biased opinions about what's best from an S&C standpoint. But maybe that's not best for that particular athlete. Maybe that athlete likes going in without doing any strength work. They just want conditioning. Hey, maybe you don't agree with that, but they need that. And then over time, you can hopefully massage and educate and start understanding like their thought process to say, maybe you can start swinging this way. I've just had an athlete who has had no buy-in or desire to do testing whatsoever in 2 years. The thing is with the UFC is they're independent contractors. They can decide what and how much they use us, if at all.
Yeah.
They don't have to use us. It's a really unique elite sports setting. So this guy didn't want to do any testing until just recently, when after 2 years, I've built up so much trust with him that I've said, I think we should do that so we can be very direct with what you need. And his camp's been incredible.
Right.
Because of it. He's really bought into these numbers because he can see that the deficiencies we highlighted in testing are the deficiencies he's seeing and feeling.
Okay.
So he's like, this test must be legit because it's just explaining exactly what I'm feeling, but giving Gav some numbers to go away with and program. And then the program he gets targets and he feels exactly what he needs to feel.
Brilliant.
So, but it took time, and you've got to be sort of patient with that, I think. And the problem with this, mate, is at the end of it, we could have had the best camp, and then they shut the cage door. It's like, good luck. Anything could happen, right?
Well, that is the sport, isn't it? I mean, he could be heel hooked in the first 10 seconds, knocked out in the first, we see it every week, don't we?
You get caught. It happens, right? And you've had the best camp of your life.
Oh.
And so now they go back and they start doubting things that they did. And you can imagine that whole psychological process, right? But that's what we try and instill in them is before they go to the fight, help them understand like how good they're feeling right now and that preparation is the only thing you can control. Yeah. And then whatever happens after that is kind of like up to whatever happens, but you can only put those the odds in your favor by preparing as well as you can. And if you can look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and know that you've done that, then the result doesn't really matter. It does, but it doesn't, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. Well, again, you can hold your head up high as a department to know that you guys have done the best that you've done optimally.
Yep.
I guess, final curiosity, and then we'll try and move into some advice. So you're saying there that when you've got people who are maybe out there for years, and you can build that trust and build that, and you can build with them and probably build more rapport so that you can push it. Whereas some come in and out. How does that, is it frustrating when you only have short amount of times, or how do you adapt to kind of those different pressures?
I think we go back to our systems. We're a really big systematic department because we have to be, because if you don't, in such a chaotic nature, then there's so much noise that you got to deal with, and it makes it really hard to make decisions. So we're really systemized. But then the end result of like what methods you might choose at the end of that can be really varied based on the individual. So we would go back to our performance triangles, which is ultimately in, let's say, fight camp, because that's usually when people just come in for a short term and then go.
Yeah.
We'll consider the MMA hierarchy and start looking at what's the most important thing I need to help this athlete with, like the weight cut, injury mitigation, or optimized performance. Then we'll look at ecological dynamics about helping them solve movement problems. And that could come down to your perception, your cognition, and your action. So we could be looking at movement-based coordination. We could be getting them from a reaction standpoint, a decision-making. We do things called fight simulations, which is basically your pre-performance routine or rehearsal. Our fighters, on average, a stat came out the other day, on average, our fighters would fight 1.68 times per year.
Okay.
Maybe twice.
Yeah.
Some people fight 5 times, some people fight none, right? You don't know. Think of the most important sport in your country, whether it's football or if you're in America, American football or something, and you got to go to the FA Cup or the NFL, and you don't know what your warm up is before the game.
Yeah.
I don't know how to make myself feel good or feel ready. Like that's effectively what we're dealing with a lot in MMA. So our fight simulations in that ecological dynamics phase is about, can we practice the pre-routine rehearsals? We do walkouts with their songs. We put them through sparring. I'll mess with them in terms of like, oh, that was an eye poke, 1 point off. We'll get people booing, put crowd noise on, all that sort of stuff
All right. Okay.
to practice
Yeah.
that component, because they don't fight very much. They spar, but they don't go under those
Yeah.
different unique conditions. There's a great paper on it that talks about the fighter cage system, and the fighter is the things you can control with your athlete, and the cage is all the other things like the referee, the judges, the crowd, all that kind of thing. So the things we're able to control around ecological dynamics, and then finally we'll look at decay rates, like I mentioned before. So if we go through that process, then we can have better trust in our system, because we know we're making the right decisions for that athlete based on what they need, how long we got, and we can make the best decisions possible.
I love that, because I think there's such an overlap in for people who are. I mean, I'm enjoying the conversation because one, I'm a fight fan, and two, I love this kind of, so there's a huge curiosity. But I think for a lot of the listeners who might be in business or on leadership things, what I'm hearing an awful lot is, well, that's okay, because what we've got systems and processes in place. And what we can then do is just follow them from a testing, looking at priorities, looking at what needs to happen for this particular thing to hit this outcome. So if the outcome is we've got to achieve this in 8 weeks or 12 weeks, we've got 2 years. Actually, what you're doing is going back and relying upon process and systems that you've all got, good communication, good trust amongst the things, all of the overlaps, isn't there, that people can take?
Yeah. And I think the thing with systems are they've got to be robust, but they've got to be able to be flexible too. So I'm not saying that when you go through that system, it's just there's your one answer, it's clear as day. It's just guiding. You're like, now have all the information I feel like I need to make a much better educated guess or drive towards that outcome that I'm looking for, rather than going, oh, it just led me to A. Perfect. I can just do A. And the other thing with that is you never want to take away creativity from the people you work with, because they've got brilliant ideas and minds that you might not have thought of. So if you follow through that system and then at the end they go, you know what, I'm going to do X. Like, oh, I hadn't thought of doing X. That's a great call. And now you've got that in the back pocket as well. Okay. They just followed the systems, but then came up with a really creative method to execute with based on what was in front of them, which for us is very different individuals and very different needs.
Yeah, I think that, and again, that's the complexity that most people probably don't think about, is that, every athlete is going to be completely unique, isn't it? Even if everyone is the same weight and the same division, actually the skill set, the needs analysis will all be different. The backgrounds will be different. So,
yeah. And so we've got males and females. We've got 12 weight classes. We've got different stylistic backgrounds. We've got different stylistic matchups. We've got 15-minute fights. We've got 25-minute fights. We've got 30-foot octagons. We've got 25-foot octagons. All those things matter in terms of the preparation for these athletes. So if your system was too rigid, it wouldn't be able to deal with all that. No. The computer would crash. So it is just helping minimize the noise to help you make better decisions. And, I'm sure some of those decisions we maybe don't get exactly right, and others we get perfectly right. But a lot of the time, how do we know? It's like that saying, how many hamstring injuries have you stopped from happening? You don't know. You can't tell. That never happens, right?
Yeah, that's good. And I think what it also then comes back to, and the full circle bit for me, which is where I loved at the start, and I think it's kind of good to kind of bring it to the end of the conversation of where it is again, with all that information, it still comes down to you guys taking that information, but then being optimal enough to make the right decision with the information that's provided. And that all comes down to you being in the right mindset to allow you to, in your team, to then make that right decision for the athlete.
And correct. And I think also being given the platform to say, I trust you to make the right decision. I'm here if you need someone to bounce off, but I want you to feel like you can make those decisions and have belief in your own program, because that's going to just develop you as a better coach And now the team that we have around us is really strong because we're making mistakes, we're getting better, but you feel trust to say, oh, this person's got a belief in me to make this decision. I'll go ahead and make that decision.
Oh, it's so powerful. Such a
Mm.
powerful way. So just to bring it into a wrap, and I'll let you get back to
The chaos.
back to the chaos. Um, what three practical things would people listening could try today to optimize themselves better?
I mean, we mentioned coaching philosophy. I think you could probably have your own, even if it's not you're not a coach. I think you could probably have your own personal maxim or statement as to how you want to go about your business.
Yeah, I like that.
I think that's really important, but it would be also very strong to have a gap analysis and identify where maybe your weakness is, because then you can be pre-prepared, and then that might be your next 6 to 12 month goal. That would probably be number one. Uh, I think number two is to not forget about yourself uh, in terms of your own development, and that's not to do with work.
Yes, I
I
like that.
think that's to do with your own self, whether that's you want to learn about finance, you want to learn a skill set in sport, whatever that is. I think that's an important part. To be honest, for me personally, that's something that I felt's fallen away in this last 12 months, and I feel it. I feel like I've got to get back onto that and find things for myself again. Um, and then finally, oh, remind me of the question so I make sure that I don't just make
Well,
something up.
just practical things that, from the conversation, what the things that we've discussed, what were the practical things that people could try today to kind of optimize themselves or the people around them?
Yeah, I think it's an action plan. That would be great. Like
Yeah.
I'm a list maker, but I think what an action plan does is it categorizes them better for you, because you know how we can just do 1,000 things and not feel like we've done anything. I think if you can relate it to your coaching philosophy, your action plan, or your maxim, sorry, not just coaching philosophy, but your maxim, and then you relate your action plan to that. It's like, okay, this is how I'm going to achieve it, because
Yeah.
it's great having a why, but you need to know how. And I think putting 3 to 4 components and almost themes for
Yeah.
each of those things, then it might be more personal, it might be more project, it might be more relationship. You can then start shaping towards that philosophy and that maxim that you've created in the starting point.
Love it. Love it. What principle would you wish that every leader understood?
Everyone is king. You don't
Yeah.
like you don't know what people know until you talk to them and ask questions. And that also keeps you humble, right? Because
Uh,
you might think, hey, I'm great at S&C, but I know nothing about cars. I'm going to go and talk to someone about cars
yeah.
because that's not my forte.
Yeah.
And I think what that does is it gives you vulnerability. And if you've got vulnerability, other people will come along with you. If you don't have vulnerability, people will also come along with you. And then there's just this Mexican standoff of ego.
Yeah.
And I think being vulnerable is a big part of understanding what other people can teach you.
No, I love that. Love that. So I guess if anyone is interested in following you, where could they, and about your mentorship as well, do you want to share a little bit of information about that?
Yeah, mate, I'd love to. Thanks for that. It's an 8 week online mentorship, and it's predominantly for strength and conditioning coaches,
Yeah.
and it's looking at all combat sports and how to prepare those athletes. So we go through things like systematic approaches, strength and power, which is a standard one. We look at neck strength, and then blood flow restriction, breathing interventions, and then we look at how we piece that all together for programming, because combat sports is obviously a very different approach to a lot of other sports. And I think it's really important we build that. The aim is to create a community there of coaches and practitioners in combat so that we can all use each other to get better. Like I was saying, everyone is king. You never know what other people know and what they've had to go through, and hopefully to learn from them. So the mentorship is a real pride point for me, and something that I'm really trying to push forward to help other coaches and practitioners in the combat sports community. But I think there's probably some crossover for people who are just simply interested in it as well.
Well,
Yeah,
our listeners, we get listeners from, from a lot of healthcare, from S&C and business. So, they're from all over. I was even looking, we have a couple in South Korea. So
Wonderful.
So we're all over. So we'll make sure the link's in the
Yes.
bio so everything's there. And one final challenge you'd like to set the audience.
One final challenge. Ooh, I think, and it probably ties in with what we were speaking about before with the gap, is is to, rather than stick to the things you're good at, try and spend the next 6 months developing that gap more so.
Nice.
That seems like a simple challenge, but if you're honest with yourself and you identify your gap, that's pretty bloody hard.
Yeah.
To give you an example, my gap of passionate has been in my statement as a gap for 4 years now. So I'm
Okay.
still working on that one.
Well, like we opened with, we're all work in progress, aren't we?
That's
Yeah.
it.
So that's it.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you ever so much for your time. It's so insightful. I really appreciate you giving it up, and I'm really glad we managed to get this together.
Yeah. Appreciate your time, Andy. Thanks for having me on, mate.
Thank you very much. And to the listeners, see you all next one.